It was the winter New Yorkers still talk about, the one where the Hudson froze in slabs thick enough to hold seagulls. February 12, 1993. The kind of night when the city seemed to fold in on itself. The steam from manholes rose like ghosts, and even the cabs were scarce. At 11:06 p.m., a patrol unit responded to a call from the West Side Highway. A jogger had seen something near the pedestrian ramp under the Riverside Drive viaduct. "Looks like a person, maybe sleeping," he'd told dispatch. Officer Paul Donovan and rookie Lena Ortiz arrived 3 minutes later. Their headlights swept across wet concrete and chain-link fences, catching the glint of a silver earring half buried in slush. Then they saw her, a woman mid-30s, face pale against the blacktop, red wool coat soaked dark at the collar. Her hands were folded under her like she'd tried to protect herself. Donovan crouched. No pulse. Ortiz turned away and whispered, "She looks placed, not dropped." Even then the scene felt wrong, too deliberate for a random mugging. The medical examiner's van arrived just after midnight. Detective Ellen Marino, Homicide Division, short, wiry, Brooklyn-born, showed up still wearing her Yankees cap. She'd been with NYPD 15 years and didn't rattle easily, but this one bothered her before she even saw the body. Female, Caucasian, 30s, a tech read from his notes. No wallet, no purse, no footprints leading out except the joggers. Marino studied the coat. Red wool, quality tailoring, clean. Not a vagrant. Looks staged, she said. Dumped after death. Whoever did this wanted her found but not identified. By morning, a fingerprint match from the city's DMV database gave them a name. Claire Harrington, 35, Manhattan resident. Part-time art instructor at the Pratt Institute. Divorced. No kids. Her landlord told detectives she'd been last seen the night before, heading to the subway after grading portfolios. No signs of forced entry at her apartment. No note, refrigerator full. Cat hungry but alive. Marino pinned her photo to the caseboard. Short auburn hair, confident smile, eyes that seemed mid-sentence. "Let's find who cut that sentence short," she said. Autopsy results came 2 days later. Blunt force trauma to the back of the skull, consistent with a heavy object. Time of death between 9 and 10 p.m. Toxicology negative. No sexual assault, but something stood out. A faint trace of fine metallic powder embedded in a scalp wound. Not sand, not dirt, something industrial. The lab report listed it as aluminum oxide residue, possible from machining or sculpture. Sanding. That fit the profile. She taught sculpture. Was the killer someone from her studio? Marino and her partner, Detective Doug Weiss, drove to Pratt. The winter wind cut through the courtyard like broken glass. Inside the art building, heaters hissed and students shuffled around metal frames and clay busts. One of them, Ian Crow, 27, said he'd helped Claire clean up the workshop Thursday night. She left around 8:30, said she had a meeting uptown. Didn't say who. When asked about the metallic powder, he shrugged. That's everywhere in that lab. It's like glitter, sticks to everything. Still, Marino noticed his hands, small cuts across the knuckles, fresh. "You work with metal a lot?" she asked. "Weld, mostly." She bagged a sample from his jacket sleeve. Back at the precinct, the forensic team compared it to the residue found on Claire. Not a match. The compound ratios were off, another dead end. The next clue came from an unexpected place, a parking garage attendant on West End Avenue. He remembered a woman in a red coat getting into a black Buick around 9 p.m. The driver, he said, was older, maybe 50, wearing a long grey coat. They pulled footage from the garage's single VHS camera, blurry, grainy. But there, a man opening the passenger door for Claire. Zooming in, Marino froze the frame. The man's face reflected in the Buick's rear window, just long enough to reveal a familiar outline. Detective Frank Daly, retired 1990. Her stomach turned. Daly had been her mentor, the cop who taught her to read silence better than words. She stared at the screen. That can't be him, but it was. Daly had left the force after his wife's death, moved to Long Island. No known connection to Claire Harrington. Marino requested his phone records from 1993, landline only. One call stood out, placed from his number to Claire's apartment 2 days before her death. She drove out to Hicksville that same night. The retired detective answered the door himself. "Hair white now, shoulders still broad, Ellen," he said, surprised. "What brings you here?" She didn't answer right away. Need to ask you about a former Pratt Institute instructor, Claire Harrington. Something flickered behind his eyes. He gestured toward the kitchen. So you better come in. Daly poured 2 coffees and set them on the table between them. Claire was my stepniece, he said finally. My wife's sister's girl. Haven't spoken in years. Why? She's dead, Frank. He froze, cup midair. What? Found under the viaduct. Friday night. The cup rattled against the saucer. I didn't even know she was back in New York. Marino watched him carefully. His hands shook, but his eyes didn't flinch. Either he was a better liar than most, or genuinely blindsided. Mind if we take a DNA sample? Standard procedure. Of course not, he said. Back at the precinct, she wrote in her notebook, Daily cooperative. Emotion seems real. Still, why call her 2 days before death? For 3 weeks, the case stalled. Then the lab results came back. DNA from skin cells under Claire's fingernails belonged to a male relative, but not Daly. When she told him that, he sighed. Then it's probably my son. Your son? Sean Daly. He used to work in her studio when he was in art school. Haven't talked in a decade. Marino's pulse quickened. Where is he now? Somewhere upstate. He didn't like the city after everything. After what? Daly looked away. I'll have to ask him. March 1993. Detectives tracked down Sean Daly to a rental cabin near Poughkeepsie. Early 30s, unshaven, wiry. When Marino introduced herself, he didn't look surprised. I knew you'd come, he said. Why's that? He exhaled a plume of cigarette smoke. Because she's dead, and I'm the only one left to tell you what happened. Marino leaned forward. Go on. She called me that night, Sean said. Said she'd found something that would ruin Dad's life. What was it? He smiled faintly. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me. He stubbed out the cigarette. She said she had a tape. A tape of what? Sean looked past her, out toward the frozen Hudson. Of a confession. Not hers, his. Marino's throat tightened. Your father's? He nodded. Yeah, from a case he closed in '79, the one nobody ever talked about. That was the moment Marino realized the cold case she'd just opened wasn't new at all. It was the echo of an older one, a crime buried beneath another, with the same name tied to both ends. And somewhere in New York, a tape existed that could destroy a decorated detective's legacy. The question wasn't who killed Claire Harrington anymore. It was what she'd discovered, and why someone needed her silence to keep it buried. Detective Ellen Marino spent the next week chasing ghosts through NYPD's archives. The problem wasn't access, it was time. The records room on the 10th floor of One Police Plaza smelled like dust and old coffee, and every case box looked identical. She searched 1979 first, the year Sean Daly had mentioned. The database was still half paper, half microfilm. After 6 hours, she found it. Case 79412, homicide Lower East Side, victim Rosa Lopez. The file was thin. A waitress, age 26, beaten to death behind a bodega. The lead detective listed, Frank Daly. The official report said a drifter named Leo Fisher confessed and was convicted. But something about the evidence list was off. Only one fingerprint, one blood sample, both lost in transit. Marino frowned. Lost in transit meant never tested. She photocopied every page and took them home. That night, while the city's sirens bled into the hum of traffic below her apartment window, she replayed Sean Daly's words in her head. She said she had a tape, a confession. Not hers, his. The next morning, Marino met Sean at a diner off Route 9. The air smelled like burnt toast and grease. She called me 2 days before she died, Sean said quietly. Said she'd been digging through some old exhibits at Pratt for an installation on Truth and Justice. Found an unmarked VHS cassette in one of Dad's storage boxes. Marino leaned in. You saw it? He shook his head. No. She said she'd only watched a few minutes before the screen went black. She sounded shaken. Said it wasn't evidence from a case. Said it was him talking to someone off camera. Your father? Yeah. She thought it was a confession, like he'd recorded himself explaining something he covered up. She wanted to confront him about it. Marino's pen stopped mid-note. And the tape? Gone. Her apartment was cleaned out when you found her. But she told me she hid a copy. Where? Sean hesitated. In a locker at Grand Central. Grand Central Terminal, March 22, 1993. Rush hour thundered overhead, as Marino and two officers descended into the old storage area. They located locker Summer 418, registered under Claire Harrington's name. The key Sean still had on his keychain fit perfectly. Inside, under a stack of old sketchbooks, was a single VHS cassette labeled only 79 Truth. Back at the precinct, Marino signed it into evidence, slid it into the player, and pressed play. The screen flickered with static. Then a grainy image appeared. A dimly lit office, ashtray overflowing, a man's voice off camera. "This is for the record. They think the kid did it. But it wasn't him. It was me," Marino froze. The voice was unmistakable. Frank Daly, 30 years younger. Rosa Lopez fought back. "She knew me. I panicked. Couldn't let the department find out. I switched the blood sample and wrote it off. God forgive me." The tape ended in a hiss of static. The room went silent. Weiss stared at the monitor. "He confessed to murder on tape 30-plus years ago." Marino nodded slowly. "And Claire found it. That's why she died. Internal Affairs was notified within hours. By sunset, the department launched a sealed inquiry, Operation 79 Truth. But the fallout came fast. When reporters caught wind of a reopened 1979 case tied to a retired detective, rumors spread through precincts like fire. Marino drove to Hicksville that night. She didn't wait for backup. Frank Daly answered the door again. Same grey sweater, same calm demeanor. "Ellen," he said quietly, "you shouldn't be here." "You confessed, Frank, on tape." He sighed, almost relieved. "I wondered how long it would take. Claire found it. She's dead because of it." He closed his eyes. "I know. You know?" He nodded. "I tried to stop Sean from going after her." "I told him to leave it buried." Marino's voice dropped. "Are you saying your son—" "No," Daly cut in. "Sean's not a killer. He's just angry." But he wasn't the only one who knew about that tape. Then who? He looked up, eyes rimmed red. "Someone from the department. Someone who helped me cover it up back then. He still wears a badge. The name he gave her changed everything. Captain Vince Morelli, head of Manhattan North Homicide. In 1979, Morelli had been Daly's partner. He'd signed off on every piece of the Lopez case. If the confession was true, both men had buried the crime, and one of them had killed Claire to keep it hidden. Marino barely slept. She compiled every document, every call log, every alibi. The night of Claire's murder, Morelli's duty roster showed him on a training retreat upstate. But toll booth records placed his car crossing the George Washington Bridge at 8:47 p.m., barely an hour before Claire's estimated time of death. The evidence was circumstantial, but strong enough to reopen the file. March 28, 1993. Marino and Weiss confronted Morelli at the precinct. The veteran captain, tall and controlled, didn't even blink. "You're out of your depth, Ellen," he said. "You think a 30-year-old tape means anything? There's chain of custody issues, degradation. Hell, anyone could fake it." Marino slid a manila folder across the table. "Your car on the bridge, your gas receipt, and Daly's sworn statement." Morelli smirked. "Frank's losing it. He'll say anything now. But you were with Claire that night," she pressed. He stood. "This conversation's over." Marino reached into her coat and pulled out a warrant. "No, Vince, it's not." The arrest made the front page of the New York Post. Corruption and murder, NYPD captain linked to 1979 cover-up. But inside the department, no one celebrated. Old loyalty dies hard. Frank Daly turned himself in the next day, giving a full statement confirming both men had framed Leo Fisher for the Lopez murder. "Vince told me to make it disappear," he said. "Said the girl was an informant gone rogue. When Claire found the tape, he went after her before I could warn her. The DA prepared charges for conspiracy, obstruction, and second-degree murder. Still, something gnawed at Marino. The details didn't line up. The autopsy on Claire Harrington showed a left-handed strike to the skull. Morelli was right-handed. 2 nights before the grand jury hearing, Marino reviewed the evidence photos again. The metallic residue from Claire's wound wasn't ordinary sculpture dust. It was machine-grade aluminum oxide, mixed with hydraulic oil, garage compound. She stared at the lab report. Sean Daly worked part-time as a mechanic upstate. April 1993. Marino drove north through a spring drizzle to Poughkeepsie. Sean opened the cabin door before she knocked. "You figured it out," he said quietly. "Tell me I'm wrong," Marino said. He stepped back, motioning her inside. On the table sat a small metal hammer, its head dulled, its handle stained. "I didn't mean to," Sean said. "She told me about the tape. Said she was going to the press. I tried to stop her from ruining Dad's life. She hit me. I swung once. She went down. I panicked." Marino's throat tightened. "You cleaned it up." "Staged it under the bridge," he nodded. "Dad helped me after. He thought I'd just hurt her. He didn't know she was dead." "And Morelli?" Sean's eyes hardened. "He knew everything from the start. He told Dad to keep quiet. Said he'd handle it if anyone ever found the tape. That's why he killed Rosa back then, and why he would have killed Claire if I hadn't gotten there first." Sean Daly was arrested that night. When Marino delivered the news to Frank Daly, the old detective broke down in the precinct lobby. "I tried to protect him," he said. "All I did was teach him my sins." Morelli faced separate charges for the 1979 homicide after the tape was verified. Leo Fisher, the drifter who'd spent 14 years in prison for Rosa Lopez's murder, was exonerated and released. By summer, the papers called it the confession no one expected, a chain of guilt spanning father, son and partner, uncovered by a niece who only wanted the truth. But for Marino, closure never came easy. She still heard Claire's last phone message some nights. "Ellen, if anything happens to me, check 1979, you'll understand." The summer of 1993 rolled in heavy and humid, the kind of heat that glued the city to itself. By then, the story had burned through every newspaper, every late-night segment, every whispered hallway at one police plaza. 3 men, 2 detectives, and a son were tangled in one of the darkest scandals in NYPD memory. But behind the headlines, Detective Ellen Marino sat alone at her desk, sifting through what was left of the truth. The case was technically solved. Sean Daly had confessed to Claire Harrington's murder. His father, Frank, had confessed to framing an innocent man in 1979, and Captain Vince Morelli was awaiting trial for the same cover-up. But Marino couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. Not in the paperwork, not in the evidence, in the why. She visited Frank Daly one last time at Rikers. The old detective looked smaller, shrunken behind glass, eyes hollow. "Sean took a deal," Marino said quietly. 20 years with possibility of parole. Voluntary manslaughter. Said you didn't know what he'd done." Frank nodded slowly. "He told me the same." "I wish that made it better." Marino hesitated. "Why'd you record that confession back in '79? He gave a faint smile. "Because I thought I'd drink myself brave enough to turn it in someday. I never did." He leaned closer, voice dropping. "You know what being a cop does to you, Ellen? It makes you think silence is a form of loyalty. I kept that tape like a cancer in my drawer, and Claire, she just wanted to clean it out." He looked up, eyes glassy. "She believed in justice more than any of us ever did." Weeks later, a letter arrived at Marino's desk, handwritten, mailed from Rikers. No return address, but she recognized Frank's scrawl. "Ellen, there's one more thing you should know. When I found out Sean had killed her, I almost turned him in myself. Then I saw the look in his eyes. It was mine. Tell the truth. Don't protect me. I already had my chance." After she folded the letter and slid it into the back of the case file, sealing it for the record. By fall, the trials began. The courtroom smelled faintly of dust and television lights. Reporters packed every bench. People v. Morelli was the city's reckoning. Prosecutors played the 1979 tape in full for the jury. Frank Daly's trembling voice, Morelli's muffled response in the background. She wasn't supposed to be there. "Vince, then make her disappear." The room went dead silent. Morelli's attorney argued manipulation, audio degradation, even hallucination due to age. But the jury didn't buy it. After 4 days of deliberation, they returned a verdict. Guilty, second-degree murder. Obstruction and perjury. Leo Fisher, the wrongfully convicted man, sat in the back of the courtroom during sentencing. 70 years old now, beard white, hands trembling. When reporters asked if he hated the men who took half his life, he said softly, "No, hate's what put me there. Truth's what got me out." The line led every newscast that night. Sean Daly's sentencing came next. Marino attended, though she didn't have to. He declined to speak, only glanced toward her once before the judge read 20 years to life. As the deputies led him away, he stopped and said quietly, "She was trying to save him. I was trying to save us. We both failed." Marino didn't reply. Some truths weren't meant to be answered, only carried. Frank Daly never made it to testify at Morelli's appeal. In December 1993, guards found him unresponsive in his cell, heart failure, natural causes. The city barely noticed. The tabloids had moved on, but Marino went to the funeral. Only a handful attended. 2 retired detectives, a priest, and a tired woman who said she'd once been Rosa Lopez's sister. After the burial, Marino left a folded piece of paper on the coffin. Justice isn't about punishment. It's about remembering. The department spent the next decade rebuilding its credibility. The 1979 and 1993 cases became mandatory reading at the Academy under the title The Cost of Silence. Every rookie learned the same lesson Marino had lived, that loyalty without truth rots from the inside out. In 1998, Leo Fisher filed a civil suit against the city and won. He used the settlement to open a youth center in the Bronx named the Clare Foundation. Its motto hung on a plaque at the entrance: "Truth is never wasted even when it hurts." 20 years later, 2013, a grey morning in Manhattan. Marino, long retired, walked the same viaduct where Claire Harrington had been found. The bridge had been cleaned, the graffiti painted over, but the hum of traffic still pulsed like a heartbeat. She stopped where the old chalk line had been drawn and took a small object from her coat pocket, a tarnished NYPD badge, the back engraved with a number half worn away. Daly's. She set it down by the railing beside a small bouquet. A jogger passing by slowed, recognizing her from the old documentaries. "Detective Marino, right? You solved that case years ago?" She smiled faintly. "The city did." He hesitated. "Was it worth it?" "Telling the truth, I mean." Marino looked out over the Hudson, grey and endless. "Truth doesn't care if it's worth it. It just wants to be told." Later that year, a podcast episode revisited the case. The host ended with the same line that had been written on the plaque at the youth center: "Justice is not about who we punish, it's about what we face." That closing quote became viral, shared across social media under the tag, "The confession no one expected." Not just a phrase, but a reminder of a city's reckoning. Epilogue, 2023. 30 years after the night under the bridge, NYPD's cold case unit honored Ellen Marino with a lifetime service citation. She didn't make a speech. She just said one thing: every confession has 2 parts, the one you give the world and the one you live with. The first brings justice. The second brings peace. And with that, the story that began in the frozen winter of 1993 finally found its last line.